Tired of scientific jargon? Get the facts without the friction. This is Weekly Digested Science, where we translate the world's most significant peer-reviewed research into your weekly news update. For a trustworthy source of knowledge, hit like and subscribe.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are here to give you that shortcut to being, truly well-informed.
We take the latest research, distill what really matters, and deliver those nuggets of knowledge straight to you.
And today, we are wading into a subject that you see absolutely everywhere. We're talking about vaping.
Specifically, we're doing a deep dive into the very real, the measurable impact that electronic cigarettes have on your cardiovascular system.
On your heart and blood vessels.
Exactly. And our source material for this is a massive systematic review combining human, animal, and cell studies published between mid-2021 and the end of 2023.
So this is really current science.
As current as it gets. And it's a necessary conversation because the landscape has just changed so rapidly.
It really has. I mean, the research shows that in a country like Canada, used among young people, it surged by more than 4 times between 2013 and 2020. That speed is it's a huge challenge.
It really is. It forces us to confront this kind of dual reality. For a lifelong smoker, vaping is often seen as a less harmful alternative.
Right, the harm reduction argument.
But for that growing group of users who have never touched a traditional cigarette, the kids, the young adults, is this product actually safe?
And we can't let the conversation for one group completely obscure the risks for the other.
Precisely. That is the tension we want to explore. So our mission today is to cut through all that noise and give you some key, actionable insights.
We're going to distill those immediate physical effects, look at the whole switching strategy, and I think this is critical, uncover the hidden chemical risks that go way beyond just nicotine. So let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's start with the most immediate thing, the acute hit. Forget the long term for a second. If you take a few puffs from a vape, what happens right then and there?
Does it immediately impact your heart rate and blood pressure?
Yeah, exactly.
And the answer is an emphatic yes. The acute effects are significant. They're clearly measurable. It's like an immediate jolt to your entire circulatory system.
Okay, so when the meta-analysis compared it to not using anything, what were the numbers? And can you put that in, real world terms for us?
Absolutely. We're talking about an immediate, pretty significant acceleration. For your heart rate, acute e-cigarette exposure jacked it up by a mean difference of over 11 beats per minute.
11 beats. So if I'm just sitting here calmly.
It's like you suddenly got startled, or maybe you just ran up a short flight of stairs.
Wow. So taking a quick vape break at your desk is instantaneously putting a real stress load on your heart.
That's a great way to put it. And the effect on blood pressure is very similar. We saw spikes in both systolic and diastolic.
Oh my.
Systolic went up by nearly 13 points and diastolic by almost 8 points.
So those are numbers that if you saw them in a doctor's office, they'd be asking if you'd just gotten bad news or sprinted down the hallway.
Right. It is by definition an acute cardiovascular event. And the mechanism behind it is mostly the rapid delivery of nicotine.
Adrenaline.
Nicotine triggers adrenaline and noradrenaline. Those are stress hormones. They immediately cause your blood vessels to narrow.
Vasoconstriction.
Yep. And they increase your heart's demand for oxygen. So your heart is working harder, faster, and against more resistance. It's a stress event.
Okay, so how does that jolt compare to a traditional cigarette? Is it the same?
Not quite identical, but very close. Acute e-cigarette use actually resulted in a slightly lower heart rate increase compared to smoking a combustible cigarette. By about 5 beats per minute less, but, and this is the critical part, there was no statistically significant difference in the acute blood pressure spikes. Vaping or smoking, that BT spike was basically the same.
So it's a high stress event either way, but maybe a tiny bit less intense on the heart rate side with vaping.
That's what the acute data suggests. But here is a really crucial nuance, and this is where the whole harm reduction debate comes in.
Okay.
When researchers looked at exclusive vapers, people who only vape and have never smoked, they found no statistically significant differences in their resting heart rate or blood pressure compared to people who don't use anything at all.
Wait, really? So their baseline when they're not actively vaping is normal?
It appears to be, yes.
So does that mean the damage is completely reversible? Or have these people just not been vaping long enough for it to show up?
That is the exact question this research is trying to figure out. It suggests the effects are mainly temporary, these immediate physiological responses. The body seems to recover in the resting state, at least in the short term.
But I imagine hitting your vape dozens of times a day, year after year, those temporary spikes add up. You're still putting repetitive stress on your system.
Highly frequent temporary stress, that's the key. And that distinction, the acute daily spike versus the resting baseline, is so important for understanding the real health profile here.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's pivot now to the long-term question. This gets us into the switching strategy and the idea of harm reduction for smokers.
Right. If we know the acute data shows this repetitive stress, the next question is, what happens when you substitute that for the overwhelming damage from traditional cigarette combustion?
And this is where the story gets more positive, at least for former smokers.
It does. It becomes genuinely encouraging. We know that stopping combustion is the single biggest win for your cardiovascular health, period.
So what does happen to the damage smoking has already caused when someone switches completely to an e-cigarette or even nicotine replacement therapy?
It actually starts to reverse. Studies compared smokers who switched entirely, either to e-cigs with or without nicotine, or to things like patches or gum.
And over what period of time?
Over 3 to 6 months, they saw significant improvements in key cardiovascular markers, and this was across all the different quitting methods.
What were those specific markers that got better?
One of the most important is something they measure called flow-mediated dilation, or percFMD.
Right, that's a measure of how elastic your arteries are. It's like a barometer for how healthy the lining of your blood vessels is.
Exactly. It's their ability to dilate, to flex when they need to. And smoking just destroys that function. It causes what we call endothelial dysfunction. The lining gets damaged and stiff.
So when these smokers switched,
their percFMD improved significantly. Their arteries started to heal and become flexible again. We also saw their mean arterial pressure, or MAP, go down by about 1.7 points after just 3 months.
Those are real signs of the cardiovascular system actually healing itself.
It is. It confirms that the major benefit here comes from stopping the combustion process itself. It's getting away from the carbon monoxide and thousands of other toxins.
So it didn't even matter if they used nicotine vapes, nicotine-free vapes, or patches.
The benefits were seen across the board. The key is just eliminating the fire.
That is such a strong public health message. Complete cessation, no matter how you do it, provides measurable healing within months. But this brings us to the huge caveat.
The dual user.
Yes, the person who vapes and still smokes.
And this is such a critical takeaway for anyone listening. If you or someone you know thinks they're cutting back by doing both, they are likely just compounding their risk.
So they're not getting the benefits of quitting, and they're adding the risks of vaping on top.
That's exactly it. The research showed that dual users had a significantly higher risk of hypertension and even stroke prevalence compared to people who were current smokers but did not vape.
So you could actually be putting yourself in a worse position than if you had just stayed a smoker.
By continuing to smoke, you prevent that endothelial healing, and then you add the acute stress from vaping on top of the existing damage. Full switching is the only path to the cardiovascular benefit we see in these studies.
That's a vital finding. Okay, let's move beyond nicotine for a moment, because that's what everyone focuses on. Let's talk about the hidden hazards, the complex chemistry lurking in that aerosol.
Right. What else are you inhaling?
Even if you're using a zero nicotine liquid. It's so easy to blame nicotine for everything, but that cloud is far more complex.
It is. And this is where the deep dive into the engineering and the chemistry reveals these independent risks. There are 3 major non-nicotine risk areas we need to break down.
Okay.
And we'll start with probably the most surprising one, the device itself.
You mean the actual hardware?
Precisely. We see clear evidence of metal contamination. I'm talking heavy metals like nickel, manganese, zinc, copper, iron, even arsenic in the aerosol.
And where's that coming from?
It comes primarily from the components of the device, mostly the heating coil as it degrades over time and with use. The heating process basically causes these tiny metal particles to leach into the liquid and then get aerosolized.
Wow. So this isn't about a bad chemical in the liquid. It's about inhaling microscopic mechanical failure. How does that cause heart problems?
Well, when you inhale these metal particles, they trigger a really powerful inflammatory response and something called oxidative stress.
Which is like chemical damage to your cells.
Right. And that oxidative stress is a major player in damaging the endothelial lining of your blood vessels. It contributes to atherosclerosis, to overall cardiovascular disease. It's a systemic inflammation caused by a physical material failing.
It's an issue of device quality and durability then, not just the ingredients. That's a massive blind spot. What about the flavorings? People think they're just harmless food-grade stuff.
That's the second major non-nicotine risk. Many of these flavoring chemicals are cytotoxic and inflammatory.
Cytotoxic meaning they're actively toxic to cells.
Yes. We all know about diacetyl and popcorn lung, but the risks are much broader. Cinnamaldehyde, for instance, which gives that cinnamon flavor, is another one found to be highly inflammatory.
So we're moving beyond just flavor and into active biological disruption.
That's the right way to think about it. I mean, one truly startling finding in the review was from an animal model. It showed that cinnamon-flavored vapor affected embryonic cardiovascular development and function.
And this was without nicotine.
Completely without nicotine. It demonstrates that the flavoring alone can carry very serious developmental risks. It is not inert.
Yeah, it just completely blows up the myth that it's just flavoring and water vapor.
It really does. And finally, we have to come back to nicotine, but in its modern form, we need to talk about nicotine salts, or rulinic salts. They have fundamentally changed the entire market.
How are Nelicons different from the old school freebase nicotine?
Traditional freebase nicotine has a high pH. It's very alkaline. So when you inhale that vapor, it causes a really harsh throat hit.
So that harshness was sort of a natural limiting factor. It made it unpleasant to take in too much at once.
It was a self-limiting factor, exactly. It capped the concentrations at around 1.2%, maybe 2% at most. Your body instinctively rejected a massive dose.
So what did CNX salts do?
Nic salts are a chemical trick to bypass that defense mechanism. Manufacturers add organic acids like benzoic or citric acid to dramatically lower the pH of the liquid.
So it neutralizes it.
It makes the vapor way less harsh, which lets users inhale much, much higher concentrations, easily 3%, 5%, sometimes even more, without that painful feedback.
It's engineered to deliver a huge, easy hit of nicotine by getting around the body's warning system. That has to link directly back to the acute heart risk we talked about.
It absolutely does. It increases the toxicity and, crucially, the addictive potential. It's an efficiency problem designed for maximum intake.
Okay, let's connect all this research now to the most vulnerable populations, our kids, adolescents, and non-users. Because this is where the public health concern is most urgent.
Right. When we focus on adolescent users, we have to remember the timeline of brain development. The human brain keeps maturing until you're about 25 years old.
And introducing a potent neurotoxin like nicotine during that window has to have consequences.
Profound negative consequences that go way beyond just addiction. Nicotine exposure in adolescence is linked to really significant negative impacts on memory, attention, learning, and impulse control.
So the parts of the brain responsible for planning, focus, and making good decisions are still under construction.
And you're flooding that system with nicotine, which can just derail that whole development process. The long-term effects could be really profound, long before cardiovascular disease ever becomes a factor.
That's the long-term cognitive damage. What about the immediate dangers, especially to the very youngest kids, toddlers, from accidental exposure?
The data here is terrifying. The high concentration of these airnic salts makes the liquid extremely poisonous if ingested. A retrospective analysis found that kids under 2 accounted for 44% of all unintentional e-cigarette exposures.
44%. They must think the little colorful cartridges are toys or candy.
That's the theory. And when a small child accidentally ingests these liquids, the severity is it's alarming.
How alarming?
Children exposed to e-cigarette liquid had a 5.2 times higher likelihood of needing to be admitted to a healthcare facility, an ER visit, a hospitalization, compared to kids accidentally exposed to traditional cigarettes.
5 times higher. That says everything about the toxicity of the liquid in those little pods.
It really does. And finally, we have to talk about the risk to non-users from secondhand exposure. That aerosol is not benign steam that just disappears.
Right, it has to go somewhere. So what happens when it settles?
Well, the residue that's left behind is known as e-cigarette exhaled aerosol residue. It deposits on surfaces and it just lingers there,
creating a toxic film on furniture, clothes, floors.
A film that can contain residual nicotine, heavy metals, and other toxins, including tobacco-specific nitrosamines. This is classic third-hand exposure.
So crawling children, pets, they can then touch or ingest that long after the vaping is done.
Exactly. It just underscores that this is not a personal exposure limited to the user. The chemicals move into the environment and create a persistent hazard for everyone in that space.
Okay, let's bring this all together. What really stands out to me from this deep dive is the huge contradiction at the heart of vaping.
It's a real paradox.
On one hand, for dedicated smokers who switch completely, e-cigarettes seem to support a measurable reversal of some really severe cardiovascular damage. That is a clear win for harm reduction.
It is a clear benefit for those who fully stop combustion, but on the other hand, the evidence is just overwhelming that these are not harmless products.
They induce those acute repetitive stress events on the heart. They carry the hidden risks of heavy metals from the coils.
And they're chemically engineered with onyx salts to deliver these extremely high, highly addictive doses with incredible ease.
And when you factor in the growing number of non-smokers and kids using them, people who get zero harm reduction benefit, the public health math just shifts dramatically toward risk.
It does. And that really leads to our final question for you, the listener, as you process all this. Given the rapid, often unregulated evolution of these products, new agetinic salts, different metals, thousands of flavors, and knowing that our understanding of the long-term health effects still lags so far behind how much people are using them.
What's the most critical research we need now?
What additional diverse longitudinal studies would be most critical right now to fill these knowledge gaps and shape effective public health guidance for the next 5 years? We know the acute risks. We really need to prioritize the science that clarifies the cumulative damage of all those frequent temporary cardiovascular stress events.
Under the canopy where shadows play, crickets sing secrets at the edge of day. A bird calls sharp like a question in the